welcome to day 11 of 100 days of making comics. I am Joshua Kemble. What is 100 days of making comics? It's when you are supposed to spend 30 minutes a day minimum for 100 consecutive days working on your personal comic book project. It was started by Kevin Cross. It's been executed by a lot of my buddies, Scott Cirkland, Mike Emmerich, Marshall Couture, Jan. A lot of these awesome dudes have completed the 100 days of making comics. So I'm heading to work, and then while I'm heading to work, a little mental trick I like to do to kind of keep myself executing my comics on a daily basis is to kind of review. Ooh, wow. There's a lot of, sorry, I gotta turn on the heater thing. There is a lot of ice in the car. It's kind of foggy inside too. Alright, so anyhow, like I said, a mental trick I like to do in order to keep myself working on my personal projects when I get home, because a lot of people, like in a position like mine, they have a full-time job, they have family, they have a lot of things that could be distractions from them doing personal projects in the day, and justifiable distractions, right? Because you want to be a good parent, you want to be a good, like in my case, I'm a manager, and so I want to be a good manager to my staff. So, you know, a lot of these distractions can actually be justified really easily to, like, kind of skip your comics or skip your personal project. And so for me, like, one of the tricks that I use to kind of help myself stay focused on tackling my comic in short little bursts is the trick of just kind of like psychologically prepping myself, meaning like today, before I even get to work, I'm already telling myself what I'm going to do when I get home, and that way by the time I get home I'm more mentally prepared for it, and it avoids that whole like, well, I worked all day so I deserve a break, or I worked all day, I deserve time with my family, that kind of thing. What I end up doing is usually I get home, I hang out with Benji till he goes to bed. I'm with my wife till Benji goes to bed, and then I work on my comic for a little bit. 30 minutes minimum usually, and for a little bit longer most of the time, usually a couple hours at least. So anyhow, so today I'm going to try when I get home to work on inking the next panel. I might try to ink a little bit more than the next panel because it's taking a long time to ink this page. It's got a lot of panels, but I also don't want to rush it. So minimum I need to ink at least the next panel, which would be panel 4 on this page. And then I'd like to ink maybe 2 of the figures, because it's this part of the page where the person has like walked onto a sidewalk, the sidewalk's cracked, and then it's basically the sidewalk's crumbling underneath them, and the sidewalk itself is part of the panel border that's crumbling, so that it can kind of set up this clockwise panel read, which actually I thought would be really cool. So anyhow, so that's what I'm going to try to do when I get home, is like work on that. Another, like, you know, big catch for me personally is that my commute is fairly long. So I commute for about an hour each way minimum, but most of the time it's about an hour and a half. If there's traffic, it can be up to 2 hours, and that's one way to get to my work. Why do I commute so far to get to my work? Because I love my work. I love where I work. I'm thankful and happy for my position at my work. You know, no workplace is perfect, but this workplace to me is good enough to commute the distance. The other reason that I commute for so long is that my wife and I were able to purchase a house, and so we have a mortgage, and that's a situation we couldn't responsibly put ourselves in, and have her being a stay-at-home mom in pretty much any other city in California other than the Antelope Valley, which had at the time really low property costs. And so basically we were able to purchase a house, which is amazing. And the cool thing about that is, and I still really vividly remember this, but is a very cool moment because we purchased the house with art money, with money I had just earned from working as an artist, working freelance, making t-shirts, making art at work. Basically all of the profit that we used to buy the house, at least to do the down payment, was with money that had been earned doing art, doing graphic design, doing illustration. And that was a really cool moment, kind of validating in a weird way for me, because after spending, I spent about 15 years freelancing, and by freelancing, I didn't freelance like a lot of people freelance. Like a lot of people have a day job and then they freelance on top of that day job. And for me, I was just full-time freelance for 15 years. And that has its benefits and its withdrawals. Like, meaning, like if you have a bad year, selling your art, then you really are like kind of in trouble, because like you have no way of paying the rent, because that literally is all I use to pay the rent. And I don't come from like a wealthy family or anything like that, so there was nobody to subsidize the job that I had. Like, I meet a lot of freelancers who have, like maybe their wife or husband have like some kind of regular full-time job, and that kind of offsets the slow seasons in freelance. My wife and I weren't in that kind of position, so like I was the breadwinner of the family, and weirdly enough, I was freelance. And there's a lot of people out there who don't even view that as like possible, but I lived it for 15 years. Now I've gone into, in this vlog, reasons that I actually took a full-time position as an art director, and the main reason is stability for my kid and health insurance. And then also just getting kind of bored of my main duties being doing art or illustration. I felt like this is a game I already kind of know how to do. So I wanted to tackle something new. Like, I've never really managed people to the extent that I have to in art direction. I hadn't had to deal with the politics of a workplace that's a fairly large workplace. And so, yeah, and what's interesting is, since I took the position as an art director, life has substantially improved for me. Like, I have better health insurance. My son has health insurance. My wife has health insurance. And so, and not just that, but like, I get like paid time off, which is something I never got in freelance. I would take breaks, but every time I took a break, it would cost me money. And so it's just one of those things. Anyhow, so I'm heading to work. I was just rambling about some of my experience, but anyhow, so the other reason that I took a full-time job was that, like, when I was freelance, I didn't find myself having enough time to work on my personal projects, because and this is probably just my experience with freelance, and not everybody's across the board, but it was actually very difficult for me personally to find the time to work on personal projects, because I was constantly having to take the next gig, and if I wasn't working on the next gig, then I'd have to be finding the next gig, and then not just that, but like, the advantage of freelance and the disadvantage of freelance is you can work for like 12, 16 hours straight, on a daily basis, and you can get work turned in quicker, so you can get paid quicker, so you can make more money that year. And that works out, because you want to, like, when it's, at least my experience, once again, I want to qualify it as my own experience in freelance, is like this idea of feast and famine. So, you'd have these periods of time, sometimes a whole year, where you just got too much work to even handle, and you'd have to, like, schedule it out. And then there's just massive famine after that. Like, you'd have like 2 or 3 dry months where there's just no work whatsoever. And so in order to offset that, I would have to, pretty much try to get as much. Whenever I had a feast period, I'd try to get as much as I could possibly done, so that I could save up to basically cover for a famine period. So anyhow, so the advantage that I find with working full-time is that it's a fairly predictable schedule. There are some times where I have to work overtime or whatever, but regardless, I have a general idea of my work hours, and when my work hours are over, even if I have a 2-hour commute or whatever, I can still plan little windows of time to work on my personal projects more. Anyhow, I've gotten into this way more long-winded and stuff on previous vlogs, so I won't overkill it. But anyhow, so one of the tricks that also helps me do personal projects on top of full-time work is what I'm doing now, which is like trying to think about what I'm going to try to accomplish. Another thing that I'd like to try to do is start the roughs for the next t-shirt design for this client, because I was trying to, when I initially went into this, I was trying to kind of do a t-shirt design every week as well. So I feel like I've already kind of done my t-shirt design for the second week, and the first week I already finished my t-shirt design. So I'm good for 2 weeks, which would be 14 days. But I'd rather just get a head start and get going on the third t-shirt design rather than wait till I'm in my third week of 100 days of making comics. So anyhow, that's a long-winded thing, but yeah, so that's kind of a little bit about what I think about on my way to work, ways that I make it more achievable to kind of work on your own personal projects. And one thing I really want to say is that a lot of people will use their day job as a crutch or a reason they haven't worked on their personal project, and basically kind of take the approach of like, well, when I finally go freelance, then I'll have time to work on my own stuff. And that can be true. That can completely be true. But my own experience with it, and from talking to other creatives and just knowing a lot of people who work on creative projects, and want to work on their own stories or their own stuff, a lot of the time, I'll just be frank, it's just not going to happen. If you're not working on it when you have a day job, when you quit your day job and you go full-time freelance, you may not have that much time to work on it. In fact, you might have less time to work on it than you realize. Now, maybe that act of quitting and being able to have your own business and stuff will like light a fire that drives you to work on it. But I suspect that a lot of people, when they have that, are similar to my situation, where that was the draw of freelance in the first place. And when I ended up in freelance, I found that I actually had less time than what was available to me when I had full-time work. So anyhow, just a thought. And basically the gist of that thought is kind of that t-shirt design I did starting this thing off, which is like, if you have something you want to do, shut up and make stuff or quit. Meaning, the best time to start your personal project isn't when you have this fantasy time where, all the time in the world is allowed for you to get a project done. The best time is now. The best time is like, carve out little chunks of time. And that's where I think my buddy Kevin was onto something really big with this, 100 days of making comics, and why it's exploded so much. It's like, that's the trick. The big trick is just to do the work. And then once you've done the work, you start seeing the fruits of the work, and you're like, oh, and like you actually, that's the trick to getting it done, is just doing it and not waiting for ideal conditions, because they just aren't always going to exist. And what I've found too is sometimes when you give artists ideal conditions, they aren't going to be more productive. They might actually be less productive, because they feel like they have a long amount of time to delay. So anyhow, I got to get back to kind of focusing on the road, getting to work on time. But yeah, so that's just some stuff I'm thinking about on my way to work. And then I'm going to go home and I'm going to accomplish day 11 of 100 days of making comics. Pretty stoked because I've gotten 1/10 of the way through, and I feel pretty pumped about that. But if I keep making videos this long for my daily video, I may not be able to achieve it. So anyhow, I got to cut this short. I will talk to you guys in a bit. Okay, so that'll do it for day 11 of 100 days of making comics. I inked 2 panels today, which I feel pretty good about. Now I'm going to do my exercises and then hopefully go to bed. I hope you guys are having success in your 100 days challenge, and if you haven't yet, hit that little subscribe button. It actually matters, and it helps me kind of rank up in the YouTube rankings. And thanks again to those of you who've commented, liked, shared, and just discussed these videos. There have been some really cool suggestions in the comments section that have really made me kind of rethink and think about content for future hundreds episodes. So I'm pretty stoked about that too, and I look forward to hopefully taking some of that advice and implementing it in the vlogs. All right, I will talk to you guys later.